Mr. Deranger, thanks for joining us. $1.3 billion sounds like a lot, but what's your take on the announcement?
Well, you know, I think that this announcement is just the posturing of the Trudeau government, and it's right out of the playbook of the Liberals to try and win the votes of the Indigenous population. To be frank, they were elected by millennials and Indigenous people, and they're really making a play to try and continue to maintain those votes for the next upcoming election, and that's what this is. That's simply what it is, winning votes.
The budget promised to work more closely with Indigenous communities to establish a network of conservation areas. What's your opinion on those?
Well, the fact of the matter is Canada is failing when it comes to conservation. We surpassed Brazil in deforestation a few years ago. We're continuing to deforest because we're not actively taking great measures for conservation. And it's First Nations communities that have been opposing the very projects that are causing massive deforestation, like Alberta's tar sands or LNG projects or mega hydro. And so the reality is they have to work with First Nations. This isn't some, bold statement that they're doing. It's actually them trying to marginally meet some of the promises that they were elected on. Again, it's just them trying to win votes for the next upcoming election. This is just like the Kelowna Accord, the promise of $5 billion after the election, and this money isn't going to come on stream until 2019.
Another promise was to build Indigenous capacity to conserve land and animals. Would you consider that progress?
It's the optics of progress, absolutely, but I wouldn't call it actual progress. If they were serious about conservation and species protection, we wouldn't still be talking about tar sands expansion, pipeline corridor expansion. We wouldn't be talking about massive LNG or fracking or mega hydro. All of these projects threaten the biodiversity of this country, and we are not meeting our international commitments when it comes to biodiversity management or the respect of Indigenous rights. If we want to talk about real reconciliation in this country, it's going to be more than just conservation dollars to work in partnership. We need to move beyond co-management and move to restoring the rights of Indigenous peoples over their autonomy over their lands and territories.
A guest on APTN's Nation to Nation noted that if more Indigenous people worked on the ground in conservation, something like 2014's Mount Polley mining disaster in BC could have been prevented. Is that something you'd agree with?
I absolutely agree that if we have more First Nations involved with the management of our lands and territories, we would see less environmental disasters like Mount Polley. But the reality is co-management isn't going to give us the authority we need over our lands and territories. If we're talking about real management of our lands and territories, it's giving it back. And there's now precedence for that. The new president of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, just had the Land Seizure Act that was just passed, where he said that we must ensure that our people's dignity is restored without giving compensation to those who stole our land. If we want real compensation, we want to see real progress when it comes to conservation and management of our lands and territories, we need to be talking about restoring Indigenous rights and control over lands and territory. This bill and this money is not going to do that.
What would a green budget look like from an Indigenous perspective?
Well, I think it actually has less to do with dollar amounts and has to do with giving First Nations the abilities to have control over their lands and territories. No amount of money is going to fix the issue. It's going to come from actual real progress in giving First Nations the rights and control over their lands and territories. Then we would actually start to see that real progress. The fact of the matter is Indigenous peoples' lands and territories worldwide sit atop of 80% of the world's biodiversity. We have to be leaders, not just people that are consulted, but leaders in seeing how our lands and territories are managed. And that's not going to just come with money, that's going to come with power and control.
Ms. Deranger, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you.